A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to him and Chris Como. I joked around that, what level, TPI has their 1, 2, 3 levels. And I go, what level am I on, the Sasha McKenzie biomechanics, what level? And I go, level 500, one level for each phone call that I've made to you in the last, 10 years. And he responded, way higher than 500, buddy, way higher than 500. But every time I get a little, I get a little fearful calling Sasha. I don't like to call him too much because I don't want to bother him, but because he's got a family and a life and a job and the stack. When I do call him, I'm a little fearful of, taking up his time and asking him a question that I might have already asked before, or asking a question that he's going to be mad at me about because I should understand it, but it never happens. He is always willing to take a few minutes on the phone and explain it to me, and that's not everybody, but more often than not, that's how these guys are. They want to be asked questions, sometimes stupid questions like I ask, or good questions. They really, because they start thinking about it more, and they figure out the next best question to ask. And so hopefully from little questions that I've given him over time, maybe I've pushed him in a certain direction. Probably not. But I mean, he consults with Ping. He consults, obviously, he's done Rapsodo and several other companies in the past. And I know his experience in the golf business has made him ask better questions. The same with Frederick Tuxen at the show. 1,000 teachers are standing in that little crowded hallway asking him questions about, hey, why don't you put this into the, and he writes it all down, and that's how they get better. They get critiqued and they make things better. And that's why I appreciate those guys so much.
I was very surprised. I've been very lucky on this show. I would probably put the guest list on here, and I'd be very apt to say I'll challenge anybody else's guest list. Now, there might be others that I know there's some bigger shows that have tour pros on there and everything else, but tour pros would be great to talk to, but they're very
Silo 3.
not so much about the swing, but just about the life. And
Right.
sometimes they think that they're always kind of defending against gotcha moments because that's what they deal with the press. I don't
Right.
classify myself as press. I'm a golf coach and golf nerd, junkie, whatever you want to say, and just continue to learn. So tour pros aren't the focus really of the show. It's more about learning. So, tagline is improve your game in life. And you look at the spectrum of health professionals, trainers, coaches, engineers, designers, CEOs. That's how you're going to run your business, et cetera. They've always been more interesting to me. But the one thing I was worried starting is like outside of my area, Hilton has not the biggest area. I guess I have a good reputation. I've been here. I've played well. I taught well, but not a lot of people know who I am. How the hell am I going to get anybody on my show? But I
Right.
was extremely surprised at some of these guests that said, I'd love to come on. Let's talk about it. Stu McGill spent a day and a half with me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like hitting the lottery.
He
And
he
they are more than happy. People at that level, you'd be very surprised, are more than happy if you have intelligent questions that you didn't just Google your questions. Don't ever
Right.
ask someone a question you can get the answer on Google. If you
Right.
have deep thoughted, they know that you spent time to come up with some things that you would like to know. You spent time in your lab coming up with your theory, and you spent time out on the driving range in the real world or the golf course with your students and saying, man, I cannot solve this problem. Let me go to Stu or Michael Nesbitt or Sasha McKenzie or Phil Cheatham because I need an answer. And when you ask them a question that they know there's some real work behind that, they are more than happy. I think it makes them feel good to know that their life's work is in demand, number one, and can help other people to a greater level.
I called Stephen Nesbitt probably in 2006 or 7, and I was in my golf shop. John Hardesty was right next to me. I called him, I saw his name at the end of a paper, and I called Lafayette College, got his number, and he picked up the phone on the second ring. And he's like, we talked for, a minute, and he's like, what took you guys so long? And basically meaning, well, why are you the first golf teacher to call me about all this stuff that I've been doing for 10 years? And then obviously Jacobs kind of took the ball and ran with that since he was up there in New York and pretty close to Lafayette
Mhm.
College. And we invited Nesbitt to Anti Summit 1 and Anti Summit 2, and we had some fun there. And we got to know some researchers, Manzella and I, through that. And but he, like you said, he was excited about talking about the work that he had been doing. He wasn't a golfer, but he did all these simulations on his computer. His little laptop was over on the side running these simulations on, the shape of his hand path, and that made him happy, and he wanted to talk about it. So and the same can go for Quan and Sasho and Rob Neal and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, Paul Wood and Eric and all the guys at Ping, they just love talking about it. Yeah, every time I think they're not going to want to talk about it, they end up talking about it because that's what they're into.
Yeah, I mean, they've done it for decades. That's their passion. That's what they enjoy. That's what they're very good at. They're smart at. They know. And
Right,
I have found out on this show when people get an opportunity to discuss things that they're that is their thing that they've spent a lifetime working on, then they're more than willing to discuss those things.
right.
And I just happen to have a curious mind and will ask a question and step out of somebody's way because I know that people I ask to come on are selected for reasons. They're very good at what they do. They're smart and they've had success or they've done some very interesting and cool things. And I want to hear it. And fortunately for me, a lot of other people want to hear it too. And I guess I've become a conduit to get some more information out there, or like we talked about today, to clear some of the misconceptions that people had about your presentation at Open Forum, or maybe shed more light on it. Um, so for me, being able to do that makes me feel better that I can contribute in that way. You know,
Good.
I don't have a really, I haven't done a YouTube instructional video, I don't think, in 2 years because it's not that important to me to put
Right.
my
Yeah.
information out there.
Everybody has their niche, and you're doing a great job doing what you're doing. And I think it's just like the censorship talk of the last 6 years. Less speech is bad, more speech is good. But let people expose themselves for not knowing what they're talking about. Let people expose themselves that really have a good idea of what they're talking about, and that way we get to the end quicker. Maybe not the end, but we go in the right direction quicker if we have more people putting our thoughts into it. But
You
Stu
know,
McGill got on the phone with me, didn't know me from Adam, and we talked for an hour. And he was telling me about Serge Grakovetsky, the guy with the what's it called? Oh my God, spinal engine. The spinal
mhm,
engine theory, which I think Andy Plummer and shoot, I think maybe Jeff Martin, and
mhm,
Randall Chambly and Lucas Wald. All those guys are kind of spinal engine guys. And Stu McGill said, yeah, Serge Grakovetsky modeled like a hot dog sized part of your lumbar spine and associated all the movement of the trunk, or supercharging the rotational movement of the trunk, and assigned it to the muscles and tendons and ligaments and fascia inside a hot dog sized part of the spine. And he's like, he had an end goal, and he had to try to fit his theory
yeah.
into it, and that's not the way to go about doing it. And so that's Stu McGill, Serge Grakovetsky. Probably everybody would consider those Silo One guys, but they're fighting it out for the best information to move on, and then the information to get tamped down. So I don't necessarily know if I'd put Silo or Serge Grakovetsky, the spinal engine theorist, in Silo 2, but maybe where he was going, it was kind of Silo 2 type information.
If somebody wants to, if they're interested, let's say they're a young coach or they're getting into coaching or they have been for a couple of years and they want to learn more, they want to go from silo one to silo two and they're interested. You can't just read first page of Google. I mean, when I was doing some research on Dr. Stu, I think I was on like third, fourth, fifth page. And I found one article and we talked about this at breakfast that day. There was a out in the training ether of his silo and some of the people that would be in two that were knocking him. And I'll tell everybody because I obviously the podcast covers a broad spectrum, as hence the name 360. I talk to trainers, therapists, health
Mhm.
people, et cetera, coaches. It's no different than things get filtered down from the people at the top of that theory, and then the people down below start arguing it. And what they're arguing is nowhere near what the two people at the top are discussing.
Golf.
Yes, and Chris Summers was the director of the U.S. gymnastics team for I think the training out in Colorado, and there was an article where he disagreed with something Stu said, but if you dug a little deeper, you found out that he later said, "No, what Stu and I were talking about were two somewhat similar but different things, and he and I have talked, and yes, we're in full agreement now."
Hmm.
So it's like if you're going to read onto something, don't just grab the clickbait or the simple thing to get. There is
Right.
often more substance behind that.
For sure. For sure.